My name is Michael Fusco. I'm Director of Religious Education here at St. Helens for grades 5 through 10. And we have a very special program for you here tonight. Right now, we're being live streamed to all of our parishioners and people that didn't feel comfortable coming out here tonight. So we have a great evening, and today you will be inspired. And we have Father Leo Patalinghug. He is going to be here to talk to us and inspire us about our faith. And I'm going to just turn it on over to him. But to everyone that's watching online, welcome and enjoy the show.
All right. Boy, that was awkward. Guys made me feel like Napoleon Dynamite doing his dance. So, listen, it's great to be with you all, literally. So good to see people kind of coming out. And for all those people who are watching live, does this make my butt look big? I'm just wondering. I mean, no, because I think the camera adds 5 extra pounds to you. 10, thanks a lot. But what's really funny is that on TV, because I do a lot of TV, you don't get a realistic experience. It's called editing. There is nothing called reality TV that is real, and I can tell you that because I am on TV every Sunday at 4:30, okay? And on TV, there is something called editing, which means if you mess up, it doesn't look like it. And that's the real interesting part, is that reality is no longer real. You know what's real? When you can taste and see in real life the goodness of God. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be putting on my apron because it's black and therefore slimming. And more importantly, it's a reminder of the first thing that I got put on when I was ordained a deacon. A deacon is someone who is called to serve the church in an official way. And as a deacon, we wore what is called a dalmatic, which is actually an apron, which is why I sell them. And more importantly, it's a reminder that when you wear one, you are not to be served, you are a servant. And so I think every one of us should have an apron, especially mine. But more importantly, you should have an apron to remind you that you are called to serve, because especially in this world, in this day and age, I think we all become a little uniquely, self-serving. We do things that are going to benefit us. And if there's one thing that can correct that kind of selfishness that comes very naturally, it's cooking. It's cooking for people. It's serving them. And what I'm going to be cooking for you, as I mentioned at Mass, is I'm cooking penne alla vodka. This is something that I do everywhere, and I think it's going to be something that you all should be able to even cook in your own homes. But more importantly, something that I hope you will serve your family. And as strange as it is for you to see a priest up here with all of these cooking equipment and me sharpening my knife, please know that this is a very Catholic thing that I'm doing. It's a Catholic thing because as a priest, my job is to shepherd people. They call me pastor, so that basically means I've got to feed the flock. And I got to tell you something, the flock is finicky. The flock can be offering the most amazing things, and we say, no, you don't want any of that stuff. Because we are kind of stuck on gummy bears and processed food. And what I want to do is I want to elevate your palate. Basically, you know what I want to do? I want to help you grow the faith up. Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have the spirituality of children, and you're not. And I think one of the big struggles, and I'm saying this kind of talking a little bit more in an edgy fashion because I've got teenagers here, you've heard the worst. But I think more importantly is because I think we have to learn how to talk appropriately to the different age groups. And more importantly, to talk their language. And what is the language that you all talk right now? It is food. And it really disgusts me that all you kids can eat and not gain a single pound. It all just goes to their hair and feet. It's amazing. But hopefully the food that I'm going to give to you is going to be food that touches your soul. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about food in a very process-oriented way, because as a priest and as a professional chef, My job is to make sure that you are being fed body, mind, and soul. And the fact is, the easiest way to touch people's hearts and minds is to go through their stomach, which is why, as a priest and as a chef, I've been doing this for so many years, traveling around the country, around the world, sharing a message that hopefully brings the family back around the dinner table. And why? Because technically, it's exactly what teenagers want. I'm going to throw some statistics at you, and you're probably not going to believe it. But guess what? MTV, at one point they actually used to play music videos. It was amazing. Y'all remember that? Okay, if you do remember that, you're old, all right? Because that's how I remember it. These days, I don't know what they play, but MTV actually started off as a music video for teenagers and young people, and they basically asked a question, thousands of young people. They asked, what makes you happiest? What makes you happiest? Guess what the overwhelming response was? Spending time with my family. Yeah, and all these older people are like, who the heaven are these kids? I mean, like, I don't think my kids want to spend time with me. No, but they do, because they're smart, because they know that if they have a good relationship with mom and dad, guess what? Mom and dad are going to be a little bit more lenient with them if they mess up. And mom and dad are going to give them the extra $20 for, they're kind of like the work that they've done, and they might need a little cash for spending. They know that if they've got a good relationship with mom and dad, they can come back even if they've squandered all of their inheritance on a life of dissipation. Kind of sounds like the prodigal kid, right? The prodigal father. That kid messed up, but he had a good enough relationship with his dad, and his dad was in a good enough relationship with that kid that he was able to welcome him back home. And we know that the only reason why that kid came back home was simply because he was like every college kid. He was hungry and needed to do his laundry. And I call him the prodigal father simply because that's what the older brother called his dad. Remember the older brother? The older brother was just downright mad. He wasn't invited to, well, he was invited. He just chose not to celebrate when that kid came home. And when that kid came home, it was a very unique set of circumstances. And the reason why he came home, again, because he was hungry, but more importantly, he knew he had a place at home. You see, my mom and dad are going to become saints because of my brothers and sisters. They were not perfect in the least. In fact, my sister was a holy terror. But you know what my mom and dad did? Always welcomed her home. At one point, she even ran away because she was so oppressed because she had to do dishes on occasion. You know what my mom and dad did? Brought her food. Food is the great gift that gets you to where you want to be. We are hungry, but for what? Well, we're hungry for community. That's why another research, CASA, the Center of Addictions and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, they basically determined that if you want to reduce drug addiction, teen pregnancy, teen suicide, plus improve your teens' testing scores, and now everyone is listening and taking notes, the number one factor in all of that is a regular family meal. A regular family meal. It sounds so simple. And you are all freaking out a little bit because he is chopping and not even looking, but people do not freak out. I'm a professional. And more importantly, I practice with this thing. How many of y'all can cook? I hope you all are going to learn a little bit. And you're going to learn about this knife because this knife is simply an analogy to faith. In fact, it's so surprising that food and faith go perfectly together. Food and faith and family, and my other favorite F word. F-U-N. What did you think I was going to say? You got a little nervous, didn't you? Why would I drop the F-bomb on you people? The only F-bomb is going to be the food bomb, and we are going to make sure that we not only eat good food, we can actually celebrate. But my greatest desire right now, to be honest with you, I pray about this and I sometimes even have nightmares about this. My greatest desire is to not be boring. How many of you think that church can be boring? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 honest people. The rest of you I will see in confession. Because church can be boring. and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to tell you how. Church can be boring by giving you the definition of boring when you don't ask questions. In other words, boring can be defined as answering a question that no one is asking. That is truly boring. When people start talking about stuff and you couldn't care less about it because you never really asked about it, that's when church can get boring. So you want to avoid being bored in church? Start asking questions, which is something that I did. And unfortunately, I did it in an arrogant way, so I was just simply questioning authority. I don't want you to do that. I want you to quest the author. See the difference? Questioning authority is just like annoying people who just poke and ask why. Questing the author is a little bit more humble. You're questioning either authority or you're seeking the author of a thing. And that's actually what happened with me. I was just like you. In fact, just shorter. But anyway, I would sit in church, and I remember looking at my mom one day, and I said to my mom, and this is God's honest truth, I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to kill myself right here. I was that bored. And my mom looked at me and she said, you picked the right place to do it. That's what she said. And then I remember telling my dad, Dad, that priest is so boring. And you know what my dad said? Well, if you could do a better job, do it. And I think the reason why I'm a priest right now is to show my dad up, honestly. And you know what my dad did that day? He says, okay, you think he's boring? Come with me. He took me to the priest. And he said, Leo, tell Father what you just told me. Mortified. And I said to the priest, Father, I was just telling my dad that I didn't fully understand the homily. I'm a euphemizer, right? I mean, like, no, that's not what I said. And my dad says, that's not what you said. Tell him what you said. And I said, you were boring. And the priest turned white. And that's surprising because he was already really white. And he just was shocked. And I think I embarrassed him more than I embarrassed myself. Because he simply said to me, I'm sorry, I didn't want to be boring. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want to be boring. I want you to know that if church is ever boring, it's not because we want to. It might be because we don't know how to make what we're serving digestible to you. I mean, the fact is, we've got big truths out there. And we have got to squeeze it all in a 10-minute homily. And that's not easy. About a few days later, he called my folks up and asked if I can come with them to his office. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get in some serious trouble. You know what he made me do? He sat down and he again apologized. And then he said, can you tell me what you would say next week at the homily if you had these readings? He made me help him write his homily. And you know what I did? I helped him. And then next weekend, I went to church. And can I tell you something? He was not as boring. Because at least he was using some of the stuff that I said. Can I tell you? Talk to Father. Talk to Monsignor. I bet you if you wanted to as a youth group and said, let's talk, because you guys have your homily series, I bet you he would even pay for pizza. And he's back there right now. And he's like, okay, I'll pay for pizza if they write my homily. Because we want nothing more as spiritual fathers to make sure you're all being fed. And why is this a big deal? Because the devil will feed you if we don't feed you. If we don't feed you good stuff, and this applies to parents too, the devil will be more than happy to feed your children. Which is why we are going to use this garlic, and we're going to smash it, and it's going to be part of it because it makes it delicious. By the way, to take the peel out of the garlic, just simply take the flat end of the knife, give it a little bit of a smash. It pulls the peel right off. Do not do this, okay? And you're like, oh my God, that is so common sense. But is it really? Because common sense ain't so common anymore. If you want to get to heaven, which by the way, I'm presuming you do, so I know this is active participation, and if you notice, teens, you only like to participate in things that you want to participate in, but maybe this is something you might want to raise your hand if this is true. How many of you want to get to heaven? Raise your hand. Okay, pretty good. Some of you are still thinking about it. Dude back there was like, you gonna go? I'll go if you go. I mean, seriously, what's the alternative? Because there is one. So knowing that, let me ask you, how many of you are going to become saints? Raise your hand. Okay, awkward. So I'm going to drop the F-bomb on you people, the faith bomb. The only people who get to heaven are saints. So how do you become a saint? And I'm going to tell you right now. You become a saint by eating with Jesus. You become a saint by eating what he has to serve, because you are what you eat. And I want to just make you question yourselves right now. When it comes to faith, who is feeding you? And you're thinking, yeah, like the priest, the father. Yeah, but that's maybe like 1 hour a week, and maybe we leave right after church, right after communion, and we don't even really pay attention to the faith. So I got to ask, how are we being fed in body, mind, and spirit? Because again, if we don't feed you well, the devil will. So in this particular talk with the majority of teens, I want you to be able to ask yourself the question, what are you hungering for when it comes to your faith? And I can say one thing that I've known, because I do a lot of youth conferences, that they're hungering for community. You're hungering to not feel so alone in a world that will question you and even cancel you if they know you're a Christian. Because they somehow think that we teach like hateful things. That couldn't be farther from the truth. You know who that is? It's once again the devil. He or she. I like to use inclusive language when I talk about the devil. The devil likes to make bad things look good, and good things look stupid, boring, dumb. And that's why a saint always knows that even if God is serving the bitter herbs of truth, there is a vinaigrette that can help you digest the bitter herbs of truth. And that recipe is found in my book. 2 tablespoons of olive oil, perfectly measured. We are going to be starting up the cooking process right now, but you're thinking, oh my gosh, is this a talk show or is it just a cooking show? It is both. And why? Because the best talk shows aren't just the ones that tell you how to cook, but more importantly, tell you why. And what I've just done right now is a technique called mise en place, a French term that basically says put in place. And that word mise is the same word as mass, interestingly enough. In fact, if you were to conjugate mittere, which is the verb, it would sound like missio, missionis, missionary, which is someone who is sent. The verb mittere literally means to send. And therefore, if you have a missive, there was a time, honestly, when we would send messages to people and actually write on paper. It's amazing. It's called a letter, also known as a missive. Now we just send texts. If I dismiss you, I send you away. And that's why at the end of Mass, the priest or the deacon will say, Missa est. And that simply means Mass is finished. And therefore, you would all say, thanks be to God. And you would leave so fast that you would come out there literally like a missile, which is exactly the same root word as missile, as Mass. Because at the end of Mass, you literally are sent. And what does a missile do? Y'all know, what does a missile do? It gets launched and then explodes. Explodes with what? What's ever inside the missile. And my question is, at the end of Mass, who or what is inside of you? I know that my pan is hot right now because I can see what is called the smoking point. I'm going to now make my most favorite sound ever. Ready? Second only to when the priest says, Mass is ended, go in peace. That's actually my favorite sound. And now you know why. because we literally become what we said we would become. And all I'm doing is I'm just simply tossing these vegetables. These are the aromatics for our sauce. I'm going to throw in the garlic now. We're going to continue to talk about how Mass feeds us. But people always ask, why do chefs do that with the food? And the answer is, because it's cool, and you know it. It just gives kind of like a look of what chefs do when they are practiced. They can kind of play with their food, but most importantly, they can make sure that even an onion is delicious. And did y'all notice that I just cut an onion and I didn't even cry? No tears. Did you notice that? It's a sign of my holiness. Or, more importantly, it's a sign of the fact that I did not have my face buried in the onion because its fumes are obnoxious. And I'm in an open room where there's a lot of air moving through, which is a great lesson for us. When life gets to the point where you're in tears, you know what you need to do? Open up a window. Let some air in. Another thing you can do is if life gets obnoxious like that onion, you can actually put that onion into the refrigerator for a couple hours, and it'll actually mute the obnoxious fumes, which is another life lesson. If life gets obnoxious, go into your refrigerator and chill out. Honestly, we are becoming freaks of nature. As soon as someone challenges us, we literally explode and we have a protest and we start calling a bunch of phobic names. No. It's not the end of the world until it's the end of the world. Please remember that when people disagree with you, it's not hate speech. Please remember that. And the best thing you can do with people who disagree with you is something that I've learned to do. Eat with them. Because the better the food, the better the conversation. The better the food, the more they will listen to you. Because they can't talk with their mouth full. And that's the objective. That's what Jesus did. That's why in all of the sacred scriptures, you see how food and faith literally go hand in hand. It is amazing how God used food from the very beginning to try to remind people that, yeah, you ate the forbidden fruit, and so now you have to work for your food. Remember that? At one point, food just came for free. I mean, it was like amazing that they didn't have to do any work, but because of that sin, they had to toil for the bread that they would eat. But God didn't give up on his people. In fact, he would give them a promise. And he says, I will give you a land once again flowing with milk and honey. You just have to simply go through a desert experience for how long? How long? 40 years. 40 years, that is right. A lot of people confuse it and say 40 days. But 40 days is actually just what we go through during Lent, which, by the way, people think is a miserable time. No. People think that Lent is only so you can eat fish on Fridays as if somehow that's penitential. Not the way I make it, people. It is delicious. But the reason why people eat fish, can I tell you why? Is because the word fish in Greek is ichthos. And the word ichthos is actually an acronym for the phrase, Jesus Christus huius Theus soter. Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. You take the first letter of that sentence, and it literally spells fish, which is why Jesus encouraged Peter to become a fisher of man, to get them to come to the boat. Do you know what the problem is? The bait. We are not good bait anymore. We're putting it out there and people are like, I don't want to eat that. And so I'm trying to encourage everyone, including your moms and dads, including you moms and dads. The next time you try to get your kid to church, please sound nicer. I think mom and dads, if they come up to me sometimes, they're like, Father Leo, my kid, I sent him to Catholic school and youth group and they don't go to church anymore. And I say, well, if you talk like that, I can understand why. We all got to learn how to talk better about faith, but that also means we got to learn how to ask a question. Like, I can't tell you how many times people come up to me and be like, why can't priests get married? Why can't women become priests? Why can't people of the same sex just have a relationship and be happy? Why do you have to tell people how to love each other? And then I'll just be like, do you want to hear the answer? Some of them don't. And that's what makes you boring. Because you walk into church thinking, you don't need to learn anything because I got all the answers. Or you presume the church doesn't have the answers. And I got to tell you something. The church has been around for thousands of years, and we have made this world a better place. We have made it beautiful. Have we made mistakes? Yes. But thank God we have confession, which is a very good thing. That's why the people had to go through a penitential experience before they could get to a land flowing with milk and honey. I've got to mince this parsley. And this parsley is going to get minced by simply me shaving off the leaves, because that's where a lot of the flavor is. But please know that there's also flavor in the stem. But if you can't mince this down, don't throw it away. Chefs would never throw it away. They would either use it in a stock or they would break it down. But if you don't have that ability, don't throw it away. It is a sin. My mom says so. My mom would say, don't throw that away. There are hungry people in the Philippines who would eat that food. And I'd be like, well, then wrap it up and send it to them, woman. What am I supposed to do with it, right? Well, if you can't figure that out, take all of the scraps of the peel and the onions, and you just put in some boiling water, take it to a blender, and then dump it in your garden. You've got instant compost. Super easy. All right. So now that we got our onions and garlic sauteed, by the way, can you smell this? Doesn't it smell good? I want to use this as incense at church. Because you know what will happen if we do that? People would actually come hungry. And that's, again, another problem. People come to church thinking they're already full of so much knowledge that the church has none. And so what I want you to do is to come hungry. That's why we have an hour-long fast, people. The hour fast before receiving communion. Do you remember that? Have you heard of this before? Probably not. You should learn it. An hour fast. At one point, it was a 12-hour fast because if it made us physically hungry, it could make us spiritually hungry. And what's interesting about that is a lot of times people just be like, when you say an hour before receiving communion, are you talking about at the point you receive communion or at the point math starts? So you know what I did? The math. Because I'm Asian. I'm good at it. And basically what I realized was that if we simply waited an hour from the point we received communion, we would have to wait 15 minutes? You mean to tell me that we can't be hungry for 15 minutes? Are we that pathetic? I mean, seriously. I mean, we're not children. But maybe what that's telling us is exactly what St. Paul was warning the people when he wrote his letter to the Filipinos. Because you know what St. Paul said. St. Paul said, your bellies have become your God. So I ask you, what do you hunger for? And where do you go to be fed? Next ingredient, after I have the aromatics beautifully sweated, you can see it's starting to turn a nice little golden brown color, right? The next thing we have to do is add something called lo doppio concentrato di pomodoro, also known as tomato paste. And tomato paste is a very tricky ingredient because a lot of people think it's too strong, too sweet, too thick, and it takes too long to cook. And you always have to add water in the can and zhuzh it around so it doesn't go to waste. So here's a technique. I just cut the top off. I also cut the bottom off and check out what I can do. Push it all the way through, and it comes out nice and clean, and people get very excited about that. And you got to ask, why do you get excited about that? It's because it's a technique that helps you to do things better, which kind of makes me ask you, techniques help us to do things better, whether it be in basketball, whether it be in dance, whether it be in a math equation or cooking. But let me ask you this. What's the technique that you use to feed yourself spiritually? What's the technique that you use to pray better? What's the technique for you to teach the faith better? There are a lot of techniques that we need to learn and put into practice. And what you're doing is kind of learning these techniques. And it's not so easy, but guess what it requires? Practice. Because practice kind of makes perfect. And we know that, but we don't do that. Which is why these Jewish people were asking for 40 years and longer, saying, God, send to us someone who can teach us the way, the truth, and the life. And that's why God will send to this world the greatest Food Network star it has ever known. And who is that greatest Food Network star? Who is it? Bobby Flay, seriously. I beat Bobby Flay, all right? Season 7, episode 1. But who is the greatest Food Network star? Who is it? Who is it? Chef Leo. I mean, this guy right here, front seat even, huh? Chef Leo, I appreciate that, but I'm not on the Food Network, only just a few times, like when I beat Bobby Flay. I'm on EWTN every Sunday at 4:30. You can DVR at whose? Come on, I'll have to give you the answer because you all are like sleepy Catholics, which is a great problem in our Catholic Church. We are asleep because I think we're eating the lies that just say, you don't have to be active in the world. The greatest Food Network star is Jesus Christ himself. And you don't believe me? I'm telling you, he is more than a star. He's the uncreated light. He is more than a networker. He is an incorporator. He doesn't just want to have an association with you. He wants you to be a part of him. He is the greatest foodie. I will prove it. He was born in a little town of... People, that sucked. That was really bad. I mean, Christmas was just like, what, last month? Let's try that again. Jesus was born in a little town of... which in Aramaic means house of bread. And in Arabic, it means house of meat. It's where the Jews bought bread. It's where the Arabs bought meat. And he was placed away in a... which is the same Italian word, mangiare, to eat. And you think, bread, meat, to eat? That sounds an awful lot like the Eucharist. And you say, duh, of course it does. Because that's exactly, he takes that very seriously. He takes that so seriously that his first miracle was what? What? Yeah, water into wine. Give these guys a chance to answer the question, because he knows the answer, because Sister Mary Holy Waterfont taught you well. But it's true. The first miracle was water into wine. And the reason why he knew it is because he's an adult Catholic who can drink it. But you were thinking it, and I know you know it, but this is kind of impressive knowing that he turned not just ordinary water, it was water for cleansing, which means water to wash dishes or to wash people's feet, which is kind of gross because you think, ew, why wouldn't you use something like purified? I don't know, like Evian or something like that, or San Pellegrino water. He used ordinary because in his hands, he can make ordinary extraordinary, which basically means he can take you, ordinary teens, and turn you into a saint. If you don't believe me, just pay attention to Blessed Carlo Acutis, who died as like a 15-year-old, and he became a saint because he talked about the Eucharist as his spiritual food. This is a kid who just had such an understanding for the Eucharist that he created a website using his gifts and talents. I think one of the big struggles in the church is not that we don't have enough priests. I don't think we have enough Christians willing to share their gifts. And that's what Jesus did. He shared his gift as the recreator, the renewer. He was able to take water and turn it into what? Wine. Not just any wine. Barolo, 1997. Classic Reserve. And he made a lot. Why? College kids are like, yeah, party with Jesus. No, he don't want to get you drunk. Jesus doesn't want to get you drunk. He made amazing wine of the best so that you can appreciate what he gives to us. He gives the best and he gives the most. That's why he made so much wine. Because if all you think is just simply to take a gift like wine, or take a gift like sexuality, or take a gift like driving, or take a gift like the computer, and if you don't understand how to use it, you're going to abuse it. And so what Jesus wants us to do is appreciate the finer things in life, including wine, which is why I lead retreats in Napa Valley. I have a very difficult life. But I can also tell you that the reason why Napa Valley even exists is because of Catholics who brought the vines for their sacraments. And even during the time of Prohibition, when there were other Christians who claimed that wine was the devil juice, they were still able to produce wine because of us Catholics. So, to Napa Valley and to all of those people who enjoy beverages of adult nature, you're welcome. It is our Catholic monk, Dom Perignon, who helped find the gift of champagne. Now what you're going to see here is a very caramelized pan. And you're like, dude, man, he burned that pasta. No, I did not. I caramelized it. I'm a professional. But more importantly, I pulled out the flavors that can only come from heat and timing. And that's why if church takes forever, and if sometimes church turns up the heat, we're not trying to burn you. We're trying to purify you and truly pull out your goodness, the essential goodness, is like what I did here. And now at this stage, what I've got to do is deglaze the pan. And to deglaze the pan, we're going to use Russian holy water, also known as vodka. And I'm going to use just a little bit at a time because you have to be very careful. If you use this, know that if you expose this to the flame, it will combust, all right? And if it catches on fire, please do not freak out and do not add water. It'll ruin the sauce, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add just a little bit of this vodka. So Jesus made a lot of wine, so we're going to add just a little bit more here. So the recipe in my book calls for a little bit of vodka. So I'm going to add just a little bit of vodka here. And since we're Catholic, one for good measure. And you're like, yeah, Father Leo is lit. No, I'm not. This is lit, okay? And this is a type of cooking called flambé. And people ask, why do you do that? And the answer is, because it's cool. All right, and it's also very Instagrammable or TikTokable. That just basically means Facebook for older people, okay? So get your cameras ready. Make me taller. Did you get it? All right, share that at Plating Grace. And the other reason why I do that is because it's a technique that tells me when we have cooked the alcohol out of the alcohol. So no one is getting drunk here. And what's interesting enough about this, if you do this at home, parents, this gives you a chance to talk to your kids about alcohol. Because when will you talk about it with them? Because if you don't talk about it, I guarantee you the devil will be perfectly happy to tell your kids about alcohol. And kids, teens, young people, whatever they want to call them, this gives you a chance to ask your parents, Mom, Dad, have you ever been drunk before? I dare you to ask them that. And they're going to be like, shut the faith up. But it'll actually give them a chance to connect with you and to remind you that, yeah, they might have. And they should get like at least a lesson from it. But more importantly, it'll help you to realize that, you know what? Your parents, your teachers, cops, judges, coaches, priests, we're human. We eat and drink. I mean, it's really funny. There was a time when I was, in a parish, and I was at a grocery store, and this little old lady from church goes, Father Leo, what are you doing in this grocery store? And I said, looking for a date? I mean, like, seriously, she was so freaked out. I'm like, I'm buying food. What do you think I'm doing? Don't you people think that we eat? Yeah, we eat. And I love this about the Psalms. It says, the choice portions come to the priest. I love that part. Can I tell you why? It's not because we're snobs. It's because if we don't receive the best, then we can't give the best. You have received the best. Are you giving the best? So we're trying our best because we've received it. Because you can only give what you have. So maybe that's another question to ask. Not only what are you hungering for, how have you been fed? Because if you've been fed attitude and arrogance and just anger, that's exactly what you're going to be putting out into this world. Did you notice that I turned this down a little bit? I keep taking this off and on. I should technically have been done this pasta, like, good Lord, 15, 20 minutes ago. But I'm just kind of doing this to tell you a story and also to kind of make you hungry. Isn't this making you hungry right now? Good. Then my technique is working. That's what that hour fast does. And also, you haven't eaten anything in a while, right? That's a good thing. And that's another reason why we have a very important, almost necessary part of Mass. It's called confession. You know what confession is? Confession is the opportunity to empty yourself of all of that stuff that has been built up in us. Because if we're so full of sin, then we're not going to have any room for God's grace. We're just not. I'm adding now some kosher salt because I'm very interreligious and ecumenical. I am adding a little bit of black pepper to this as well because it tastes good. And then I'm also going to add to it red chili pepper flakes, which I'm adding at this stage of the cooking process. But if I wanted to burn your faces off, I would have added this at the very beginning because it's that heat, remember, that pulls out the essential qualities of a person and of this ingredient. And so now all I've got to do is just let this kind of cook at low. I am going to divide this up after I add one final ingredient, which is heavy whipping cream. And do not judge. I'm not asking you to drink it. I'm only adding a little bit for color. And it also is going to tell us that I don't actually need Parmesan cheese or Pecorino Romano on this. You don't need it. Because there's enough cream. There's enough lactose in here. And that's something really beautiful. When I learned culinary in Italy, I studied culinary while I was studying to become a priest. They told me a phrase about proprio. It's an Italian word, proprio, proper. You know, what we sometimes do is we overdo things in America with our cuisine. You know, we have to supersize everything. It's really unbelievable. It's not a form of generosity. It's a form of greed. And I'll prove it to you. Do you remember when Jesus had his second miracle? His second miracle, does anyone recall what it was about? It has to do with food, and it has to do with a lot of food. Anyone? Second miracle? What is it? Yep. The fish and the bread. Exactly. And what's really unique about this, at least in John's gospel, is that the hero of the story is obviously always going to be Jesus, but there is a co-hero in that story, and it's a kid who is only a teenager. You young man right there, how old are you? 8. What's your name? Joey? Okay, Joey. Just so you know, that's actually my family's nickname for me, so I think we're related. But basically, Joey, that kid in the gospel was about 8 years old, and he was the only one who had any food. And there were 5,000 men, not counting women and children. And by the way, that's not the Bible being sexist. That's the way they counted households. It was the father's job to feed the children physically and spiritually. It was the dads who brought their children to this desert place to listen to the prophet for 3 days. And I can tell you it was the dad, because if it was the mom, she would have at least packed a lunch, okay? But back to you, Joey. If you're the only one here with food, and we hadn't eaten for 3 days, would you share? Do not answer. Do not incriminate yourself. I will tell you that when I was your age, McDonald's came out with chicken nuggets. And I love those things. I still love those things. And I don't care. Go ahead and judge me. My favorite fast food is Kentucky Fried Chicken. The Colonel should be beatified a saint, okay? That's 11 herbs and spices up in there. And if I can't get to that, I got to have the Jesus chicken. Chick-fil-A, right? Problem is, I always hunger for them on Sundays. Dang it. And then if I can't get there, my fried chicken of choice is Popeyes. And you know why. Because if you look at Popeyes, it really spells Pope, yes. But back to you, Joey. Would you share? I didn't. McDonald's comes out with 6-piece chicken nuggets. My brother would wait until I ate 5 of the nuggets. And then he would say, yo, Leo, are you going to eat that last nugget? And I would say, you mean this piece? If you laughed, because your kids did it too. Don't lie. How am I a priest? I'm a priest because God is generous with his mercy. And I hunger for it every day. I beg for God's mercy every day. And because of that, I actually have his mercy. I can actually share it, which is why one of my biggest projects is the Plating Grace and Grub food truck. During COVID, I turned a certain age where most people would buy a convertible. I bought a food truck. It happened because during COVID, I used to be one of those people who used to walk around in the streets. I live in Baltimore just because I wasn't afraid of air, right? And so I would walk around, and I realized that there are a lot of homeless people who have no one to panhandle to. So I would just pack my truck up, and I would just simply give food to the homeless people, and it was really sad because they were really hungry. There was no one to help them. It was like the Walking Dead kind of thing, which, by the way, is rather interesting because you know what the difference is between a zombie and a human? Do you know? Because it's a really big thing. Do you know what it is? A zombie is basically a person without a soul. We have one. Which is why Jesus knows that if we don't eat the right foods, we're going to turn into zombies. That's why he says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you'll have no life in you. A zombie says, unless I eat your flesh and drink your blood, I will have no life in me. Kind of weird, but think about that. But during that time, I basically just started serving people from my home, and I realized that we can do more, which is why I now work with a food truck. More importantly, I work with people who are coming out of the prison system. I work with ex-cons. And to be honest with you, it is not easy, to the point where I honestly think that I'm going to become one myself after I kill one of them, because they are so hard to work with. But then I realize they never had a family to teach them. In fact, you know what the number one thing that people on death row have in common? They never ate a family meal. They never had a family meal. Our job is to make sure that no one eats alone. That's why Jesus says it's easy to eat with your friends. Go ahead. Who are the people you don't like? Name them in your mind. And tomorrow, do something prophetic. Sit with them and eat with them. And be like, oh my God, that's like a Karate Kid episode. That's exactly what it is. But we're not heroes anymore, because we think that we just have to do amazing things. No, Mother Teresa, who I knew and I worked with, she said small acts with a lot of love. That's how I beat Bobby Flay. I beat Bobby because I was doing small things with a real ease. I was doing things that I knew would feed the world. And I'll tell you how I beat him. After you prove to me you're not boring. So I need my little cups, if someone has my little cups for me, so that I can serve some things. But I more importantly want to ask you all, I've been talking for a good 45 minutes. We have like another 10, 15 minutes to basically give you a chance to ask me any question, simply because it'll give you an opportunity. Oh, you're the best. Thank you very, very much, Patty. This will give me a chance to realize or to hear how you are not boring. So does anyone have any questions? And we have a microphone up here so that you can actually come up and ask your question. Trust me, you will be mightily rewarded if you ask a question. So question, question, question. And did you all notice something else too? I actually put the sauce not on top of the pasta. That's the Protestant version of that, all right? I'm Catholic. I put the pasta in the sauce. The Italians call it baptizing the pasta. And why? Because it takes on all the flavors. And I'm not making fun. I mean, this is God's honest truth. You know, like, there's a difference between just pouring something on or letting it simmer within. That's why our Protestant brothers and sisters, who I love, they don't have 7 sacraments. They only have like 2 or maybe 3 sacraments. We got 7. Then we have the saints, and we have the Blessed Mother, and we have incense, and we have a treasury of churches and prayers. So that's what it requires us to do, is to get back into holiness and immerse ourselves so that we can do what Pope Francis told us to do. Smell like the sheep, which is why I smell like olive oil and garlic. Any questions that you have? Anyone from any age group whatsoever, prove you're not boring. Microphone is here to ask a question. Come on up. Come all the way up. You've got to come all the way up to the microphone because I've got something for you.
So what was your signature dish on Beat Bobby Flay?
So well, you guys wanted to ask that question, but you were too slow on the take. That's okay. So I beat him with what is now known as Father Leo's Funky Fusion Steak Fajita with holy guacamole and screaming sour cream.
Nice.
Which is his specialty. And now you get a chance to eat this, all right? So bon appetit. Other question? Question. Come on up. And if you want, you can get a fork right here, or you can just do a shooter. Yes?
Oh, okay. So you mentioned KFC and Popeyes. What are your thoughts on Jollibee?
Jollibee?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jollibee is a Filipino fried chicken chain, and they are truly blessed individuals. They really are. I mean, they know how to cook some. Filipinos know how to cook some fried chicken, all right? I do like that. And I also like the fact that they serve it with rice, because basically that's our drug, is rice, you know? And I love the fact that it's not an expensive fried chicken, even if it's very quality. So I guess you got a little Filipino in you? Okay, I can tell. I think we're related. Kidding. Your mom's right there. Hola, salamat, walang anuman, all that Filipino stuff. Mabuhay. All right. Give that a taste. All right, question, come on up. Young man, yep, you come on up, too. You can stay behind her. Yep, you can stand for a few minutes. Yes?
Do you have like a specific parish that you like are a priest at, or do you just travel?
Yeah, so no parish would want me. I'm really good in small doses. I'm like the crazy uncle that comes in and gives candy to kids, and then they got to go to their parents, right? No, I'm actually a missionary priest, and I'm glad that you asked. You're very attentive, because I'm a weird kind of priest altogether. I belong to a community called Voluntas Dei, which means the will of God. Our charism is to say yes to God's will, no matter how weird it is. Think about Mary. I mean, she was asked to do something really weird, and she said yes to God's will. And so our charism is to discern what is God asking of us to do and to bring that into the secular world. And this is very secular until you bring Jesus to the table. And then you are platinggrace.com. There you go. My pleasure. Just like Chick-fil-A. Yes, sir.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
My favorite meal to cook is the one that I can find the ingredients in your own home. So if I were to come to your home, I would look through your cupboards, and I would look through the cabinets and the refrigerator, and then I would do this one very important thing. I will ask you, what are you hungry for? And then I would ask everyone in your family. So someone would be like, I like Mexican, I like Chinese, I like French, I like barbecue. And I would try to make something that will satisfy everyone's flavor profile from one meal. That's what I like to do when I cook. And yes, that's why I pray. So there you go.
Thank you.
All right, more questions coming up. Good, you're not boring people. I like it. By the way, even though there are a lot of youth here too, I know that some of you older folks, parents, you can ask questions too. No one's excluding you. The beauty of my ministry is so interesting, because it's not just for older people or children, it's for everyone, because we all eat. We have a belly button, which proves that from the moment we were conceived in our mother's womb, no matter what the Supreme Court tells us, God wants to feed us all, just age appropriately. By the way, young man, how is that? It's really good, isn't it? Your friends are like, I'm going to ask a question now. What's your question, young lady?
What does a day in your life look like?
A day in my life. Okay, it all depends if it's a travel day, if it's a food truck day, or if it's a TV day. And that's a great question, because my life is weird. I mean, as soon as I'm done here, as soon as I'm done here, I actually have a conference call with people in Australia. And then tomorrow morning, I have meetings with my staff, and then I also have to do some meal prep, and then I'm going to come back here at 4 and 7. But then, a couple days later, I'm going to be flying to Florida. A few days after that, I have to fly to Arkansas to do more lectures and talks. When I'm on this road for filming, it is crazy, crazy, crazy. And thank God for editing, which is what I mentioned at the beginning. And you know what? That's the real beauty. My day is crazy, but I can always pause and say, God, can you please help me edit the crazy parts of my day so that I can make it more like you want it to be? But most of the time, my day is filled with laughter, with food, with friends, and fun. And when it's not, it's because I'm not following a recipe. Thank you. Question? Come on up. You gotta come on up, just like the communion line. And then we are going to close with a little story, and then I will be in the back to kind of, I know there's a lot of young people out here, but you can also benefit from the resources I have, including one book called Grace Before Meals, which will bring your families back around the table for feast days. I can't stand when people think that the church is boring. My gosh, if it weren't for our feast days, our economy would tank. I mean, you think about it. Christmas, that's our celebration of Jesus. Champagne, that's our Catholic monk Dom Perignon. Valentine's, wine, roses, chocolate, that's our Saint Valentine who knew that love required sacrifice. He was a martyr. I mean, think about corned beef, cabbage, green beer. Who eats that stuff? But on that day, I eat that stuff. Because on that day, I'm Irish. I even changed my name to Fatherly Patalinghug. That's who I am on that day. Question, young lady.
If you could meet any cook or chef in the world, who would it be and why?
If I could be what?
Like, if you could meet any
If
chef.
I can meet any chef or cook in the world, who would it be?
Yeah.
Come on, it's Jesus. I mean, this dude was able to feed multitudes. This guy was able to turn nothing into everything. But other than that, I would probably have to say someone like Paul Prudhomme, or I would be like, okay, fine, Jada is pretty. Let's see, who else? I did love hanging out with Bobby Flay. And in fact, I saw him at an event, and he came and he called me up. He's like, hey, Father Leo, come on up here. And so we were talking, and he says, can I tell you, after your show, people were asking about you? I'm sick of people asking me about you. And I'm like, I'm not. It was awesome. So there are a lot of chefs, but what I would love to do is not just simply kind of eat their food. I would love for them to eat my food and tell me what they think, even if it would be hard for me to hear, because that's what a true chef does. They're willing to eat with even modest cooks like me. Does that make sense? Yeah. So let me ask you, who would you choose to eat with?
Like chef?
Yeah, that was your question.
Okay, Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon Ramsay? Yeah, he's good too. I just don't like how he cusses. Here you go. Actually, very interestingly enough, bon appetit, there was actually a chance for me to do a show with Gordon Ramsay, but that's a long story. They were going to call it Heaven and Hell's Kitchen. It was a very strange thing. I was too immature to do it, though, to be honest with you. Any last-minute questions? Okay, by the way, this side of the room won. All right, okay, then come on up. Come, yeah, of course you got to come on up. You've got legs. There you go.
I just was wondering, what
Yes.
inspired you to pair the priesthood with cooking?
Ah, that's a great question. Thank you. It wasn't my idea.
Really?
I mean, come on. Who studies in Rome for 6 years theology just so that he could be cooking on TV every Sunday at 4:30? I mean, like, who does that, right? I mean, this was totally God's idea, and it actually started after September the 11th, 2001.
Okay.
Because on September the 11th, 2001, and I actually write about it in one of the books there, it was devastating for our world, and I hope that you never forget and taste a little bit of that bitter herb of truth in our memory. And after a very, very busy week, and Monsignor can tell you, there were more people that came to church on that weekend than Christmas and Easter put together. We call those people priesters. There were pacers, people who pace themselves. They only come on Palm Sunday, Ash Wednesday, Christmas, Easter. They pace themselves. Everybody came to church because they were hungry for something to give them some comfort at a horrible moment like that. So after a very busy weekend, I was actually technically supposed to go to France on a pilgrimage. But then September 11th happened, everything was canceled. And I actually went to the Jersey Shore with a couple priest friends of mine on retreat. And they didn't have the Food Network. Nothing was on, remember? In fact, they said, in light of the nation's tragedies, we encourage families just to eat together because they got it. It took a pandemic to get people to actually eat together and make bread. And my God, fry cookers were just like amazingly sold out. But one of my priest friends said, well, we can't watch the Food Network, so let's just watch Leo cook. And I'm doing what I'm doing now, talking and cooking. And they said, you know, Leo, you should have a cooking show. And I said, that is the stupidest idea I had ever heard. But they kept pushing me to the point where they They encouraged the bishop to encourage me to do it. And then a producer said, let's produce a pilot. And I said, over my resurrected body. This is ridiculous. But I think it was the people of God hungering to see their shepherds not just serve a formal meal, but a family meal. And I think through a series of events, God revealed that what I do at Mass is what we should be doing at a family's dinner table, the domestic church's altar. And if you are bringing Jesus to the table, you are platinggrace.com. So, one more. Yes, sir. Come on up. And by the way, this comes to you, sir. You're my peanut gallery. You can't, I mean, you laughed the hardest at my joke. I love this guy right here. We all need one of him in our life. Let's give him a round of applause. He was brilliant. Yes, sir.
In your recipe book, do you have recipes for people who are diabetic or medically challenged?
Okay, thank you for asking, and I really, really appreciate that. He asked, do I have any recipes that are sensitive to people's dietary issues? So I'm not a dietitian, so unfortunately I don't have it. But I know that there are recipe translators online that you could say, instead of milk, you could use this. Instead of gluten, you could use this. And so you can take some of my recipes and play with it, because frankly, I don't care if you make my recipe or not. What I care about is if you take that message that I offer and digest it. So I don't know if you can eat this, but I'm still going to give it to you. And if you can't eat it, give it to somebody else. It's called regifting.
I do that. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. And more importantly, he asked the question about the books because, I told you about the 2 books, and I had another book called Epic Food Fight, A Bite-Sized History of Salvation. And that book is a spirituality book. I remember a nun read that book, and she wrote to me, and she says, Father Leo, I read your book. It made me laugh. It made me cry. But most importantly, it made me hungry for God. That was awesome. And the final book that I have is called Saving the Family. Saving the Family. And it teaches families how to eat together during the different generations of your life. And it handles the difficult topics. Because it's easy to feed your kids when you're feeding them mashed peas. But how is it easy to feed your kids when they're feeding you mashed peas? And everything in between. We got to eat together no matter what. And I do sell the aprons. There are a few CDs out there. And I can sign these books or these aprons. And they're great Christmas gifts, knowing that Christmas is only 11 months away. But more importantly, you all came because you thought you were going to get a sample of the food, which you will. But you also came because you thought that you were going to hear how I beat Bobby Flay in the Food Network Throwdown. Because I did beat him. People ask, is that real? Yes, it is. And they ask, did you cheat? I did not. In fact, when they brought the judges out, they had to taste plate A, which was mine, and plate B, which was Bobby's. And they blind tasted it, and they said that A was amazing. I'm just saying. They said that the meat melted in their mouth and that the spices were perfectly... I'm just saying what they said about A. And then they ate Bobby's B, and they said, it was good. But it was amazing. He's an Iron Chef. So how did I beat him? And by the way, he had 3 professional chefs helping him. I had a priest wearing a do-rag helping me. That's all I had. But during the judging, I whipped out my rosary and started to pray. Priest, rosary, started to pray. Couple good Catholics in the crowd, rosary prayed. My mom and dad, one in each hand. They were double-fisted. They were I mean, there was even a Muslim guy in the crowd, I think. He pulled out his beads and he's like, ah, la, 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 right? And you know what? I will take that. Because if it is the true God, it's a God who wants to feed you. If you believe in the true God, you're not going to be radical and put a bomb on you and blow people up. No. If you're rooted in the true God, you're going to put an apron on you, one of my aprons. And you're not going to blow anybody up. You're going to feed them. And then they blow up. But in the good way, kind of blow up. My whole objective is, first of all, talk to a tough crowd. A crowd of people who probably thought, oh, good Lord, I'm going to hear a priest talk about Jesus. But I didn't want to simply talk to you. I wanted to use all your senses. Taste and see, smell and digest the goodness of the Lord. you've got a couple questions that I think you need to ask yourself and your family. What makes me happy? Hopefully it's when you have a family that'll love you no matter what, good times, bad, sickness, health. Hopefully you're going to be able to ask yourself, what am I hungering for? And where do I go to be fed? And most importantly, I hope you are just going to ask yourself, do I want to get to heaven? And if I do, how do I get there? And the answer is, eat with Jesus. So I'm just simply going to conclude by saying thank you and bon appetit. So, I will be available just to meet and greet. Selfies are very cool. We'll post it on the Insta. And if you want, we have Patty and Mike to help out with food delivery. But most importantly, I think we should thank Monsignor and Father Juan and their staff here from the Religious Education Department and all the volunteers that made these nights possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bon appetit, everybody.